Good, happy Monday, everyone. It is in June, and I don't know the date, strangely enough. And we're coming to you we are the Light Gate. We are coming to you from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We are on Roku, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, and many, many other applications. I just want to remind everybody that starting in July on the 1st, we are moving our time slot from 9 p.m. Eastern until 11 p.m. Eastern to 8 p.m. Eastern until 10 p.m. Eastern. And that would be 5 o'clock on the West Coast, Pacific time. We're excited about it. It gives our guests overseas a lot better chance of talking to us instead of being in the middle of the night. It's only by 1 hour, but it still helps. And we're excited. Tonight we have a wonderful guest, Kathleen Marden. She has been with us before and we love her very much. And she has a lot of very important things to say. And I cannot wait to get this conversation started. So I'm going to give it to Preston. Go, Preston.
Thank you, Dolly. By the way, it's June 24th. But thank you guys. Thank you all for joining us here on The Light Gate, episode 61. I'm super excited. I'm, of course, your host, Preston Dennett, and my lovely co-host is Dolly Safran, contactee, subject of the book Symmetry. We are going to do a sequel. I'm doing the interviews right now. I'm learning some new exciting stuff. So very excited about that. And yes, of course, our guest tonight, who I will get to in just a moment. But I really want to thank you all for joining us here tonight. It means a lot. Because of you, we do this show. So thank you. Thank you. We're getting increasingly popular, more and more viewers. So our producers are really happy. First, I want to give a shout out to Namaste. Thank you so much for the super chat donation. It helps a lot. Believe me, it really, really does. Thank you also, Bob Thorson. You guys are awesome. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's just say hi to some of you folks here in chat. And looks like we got a nice crowd today, Dollies. I see some very familiar faces. Catherine, Four Feathers, of course.
Hi, Catherine.
Greetings. Excited for tonight's show. And Brian Morgan is second in. So thank you, Brian. Always nice to see you here. And Ruth Kleiber. Yes, these are all our familiar friends. You guys make doing this show a lot easier for me, certainly. Because I feel like, yeah, you guys are my friends. And it takes all the nervousness that I get out of doing this. Because I still get nervous even after 35 years. Which is funny to me. But it is what it is. Mountain Dan says, greetings, fellow Earthlings from East Tennessee. Thank you for joining us. And Gamma Galaxy, very cool. And who else do we got here? Dawn Curtis. Greetings, Preston and Dolly. I remember her being on TV interviewed. Yes, our guest is actually very well known. She's been in this field for quite some time. She is doing very important work. Okay, who else do we got here? Arvo. I'm not sure I've seen you here before. If I have, I'm sorry, but thank you for joining us. Love and light, everyone. Looking forward to another awesome interview. So yeah, maybe you have been here before. Andrew Rollins, ready to learn something new or have confirmation of an out-of-world experience. Yes, I think hopefully you'll get both. Louise says, greetings from New Jersey. You're awesome, Louise. Thank you for joining us. And Janice Connett.
Hi, Janice.
Let me see. Rat food. Always nice to have rat food here. Thank you so much, rat food. Okay. And Dager. Dagar. All right. Thank you, Dolly. Can always count on you for pronouncing names. John P. Adventures. Look at all those wonderful emojis. I'm not quite fluent in emoji, but that looks good.
Yeah.
All right. Twinkle Starlight and Van Darkholm and Star Orchid. Another super sticker.
Thank you
so much, Star Orchid. endless gratitude to you. It means a lot. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Kamikaze says, hello from Colorado. Such a beautiful, beautiful state. I drove through the Rockies with Dolly. We had a lot of fun. Kimberly Matthias. And who else do we got here? Love you too, Kimberly. You too smoke. It's a grifter convention. Okay. Not sure what that is.
Hey.
Mark's Shed Talk. Hello from Brisbane, Australia.
Hello.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Again, I love it when we have people from all over the world. Woo Riders DG says, hello from Florida. It's quite hot in Florida, isn't it? Let's see. Twinkle Starlight. I'm new to your channel. I'm really enjoying your videos. Oh, thank you, Twinkle. Just hit 30,000 subscribers. Yay. It's growing fast. I've worked at this pretty hard, so that's awesome to see. Thank you, Twinkle. And Audrey Miller, hello. And let's see, I think we're catching up here. Another Australian from Yallingup, Western Australia. Oh, here's a question already. I'll put a star on that so I can get to it. BW says hello. And Kaj, hello, good evening. Very cool. And
No.
Sector 31, thanks for joining us. Another super sticker donation from Vinay. Thank you so much. That is awesome. You guys just warm my heart every week. Lynn LR, much love to you. And same old ham.
I like that.
And Mrs. Smith, coming all the way from London. Thank you for staying up late for us. And
Absolutely.
hopefully in July, we'll get you to bed an hour earlier.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Dave Rowe, all the way from Auckland, New Zealand.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Oh, get this. This is nice. You're my new Art Bell. How awesome is that? Art Bell is, of course, the champ at this. His show, by the way, was the most popular in the world. That's saying something. And I got to be on Midnight in the Desert 3 times with him. So huge, huge honor. I'm glad someone is carrying the torch. Okay, who else do we got going on? White Dragon, hello. And 50 sec is about 5 USD. Hey, that's still awesome. Trust me. I like it better in SEK. What is that? Sweden? Or I'm not sure. It's a type of currency.
EU.
So very, very cool.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Louise, hello.
Hi, Louise.
Thank you so much for the super chat. You guys are awesome. My gosh, I'm just honored and delighted by you guys. Here's the answer: Swedish kroner.
Kronor. Oh, okay. Kronor. Okay.
Thank you for the information.
That's the new way to say it, I guess. I have a whole bunch of that in my jewelry box. I brought it back from Sweden. Hey, do.
All right, we better get started. So let me put
Okay.
up the banner first so you guys can see who our guest is on the banner. And let me pull up the bio, which I have right here. Now, Kathleen Marden, of course, is our guest tonight. She's very well known in this field. We are having her back for a second visit because she has so much information and we had so much fun. She was very well received on our show last time, so we're very excited to have her back. But for those of you who didn't get a chance to watch that show, let me tell you a little bit about Kathleen Marden. She's had an insatiable interest in UFOs and ETs since 1961, when, of course, her aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, had a close encounter and onboard experience in New Hampshire's White Mountains. This was an experience that changed the way we all view this subject, really popularized it. And as a family member, Kathleen was able to gain firsthand knowledge of their encounter on the very day that they arrived home. And 2 days later, she visited their home. Since then, she's devoted years to painstaking investigation of the anomalous events on the hills and archival research on their UFO abduction case. She's the trustee of Betty's estate. So she has selected files from Betty's personal archival collection for a permanent collection at the Milne Special Collections Library in the University of New Hampshire. Very, very cool. In Durham, New Hampshire. And of course, you can read about it in the book she wrote with Stanton Friedman called Captured, The Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, which is really the go-to book. There's other people writing about it in pretty much an unauthorized way. So if you want to know the truth about it, go to that book there, Captured, The Betty and Barney Hill Experience. But since 1991, Kathleen has volunteered for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, in various positions such as Director of Field Investigator Training and Founder-Director of MUFON's Experiencer Resource Team. So she really knows her stuff. In fact, over a 10-year period, she expanded her ER team from 3 members to 45 trained seasoned specialists, attracting PhDs, MDs, and many other well-trained research consultants. She also sat on the Edgar Mitchell Free Advisory Board. For those of you who don't know about Free, check it out. It's a very large, very scientifically oriented study group. She's presently working on the Marden-Barton Survey of Religious Belief and Extraterrestrial Life, which is available on her website. We're definitely going to have to talk about that. Kathleen has appeared as an on-camera commentator on 55 television shows and video productions. It's probably closer to 100 by now, I'm guessing. Let's see. Additionally, she's spoken on innumerable radio shows and podcasts and has lectured across the United States and outside of the United States, and has authored and co-authored numerous books and articles, both for UFO magazines and journals. Some of her books are available in foreign languages. She is the recipient of 2 major UFO awards, and that's a big deal because there are very few awards in this field, which is still trying to be accepted by a lot of mainstream scientists, which is actually happening, largely in part to the work of Kathleen Marden and other researchers. So, let's see. Her books include The Alien Abduction Files, Forbidden Knowledge, Extraterrestrial Contacts, Science Was Wrong, Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers, True Stories of Alien Abduction, Making Contact, and more. Some of which she's written with her co-writers, including Denise Stoner, a former guest on this show, and of course, Stanton Friedman. And if you want to learn more about Kathleen and her work, the links are in the show description. But let me stop just prattling on and bring on the guest who we came to actually hear. Thank you, Kathleen.
Hello, Dolly. Hello, Preston.
You're looking very lovely tonight. You have a nice aura about you. I normally don't see auras, but every now and then I pick up on them.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. We covered a lot last time.
Yes.
We talked about so much. It was really exciting to hear all the details about Betty's case, and Barney, of course. That I thought I knew pretty much the case inside and out. I did not. I did not know about all the additional witnesses that were out there and all the other stuff. So, man, thank you very much for coming back.
Well, it's my pleasure to be back. And I updated, Captured for the 60th anniversary of their event, and added all of the new information about the scientific studies that have been done. I never stopped seeking scientists as our technology has developed in order to look at Betty's dress. And there's some really exciting new information in that book.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I sometimes wonder what would have happened if they had not decided to go public, because they didn't have to.
Well, they didn't make that decision. Actually, that was through a violation of confidentiality. They were deeply distressed when that went public back in 1965. It was in the Boston Traveler. Articles, 5 nights, written by John Luttrell, who was an award-winning journalist. He had done an incredibly wonderful job In his research, in his investigation, when he wrote that article, he showed nothing but respect for Betty and Barney. He had interviewed people all around them. They refused to meet with him. They said, "Do not write about us." They were well known. They worked in civil rights. Barney had been appointed to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights as a representative from the state of New Hampshire. He'd been given an award for helping with Betty and other members of Rockingham County, New Hampshire, setting up the community action program for less fortunate people in the state. He was an award winner. He was speaking on civil rights around the state. Betty was a social worker for the state. There was an interracial marriage in 1961. This was not something that they wanted publicity for, and they were so deeply distressed when this occurred, when their story went public. But John Luttrell, when he wrote those 5 articles, had already found 6 witnesses and interviewed those witnesses to the craft that night. And by the 1970s, he wrote 12 to 14 in different locations, separate, not as one big group. And when he drew lines between where they stood and where the hills and the UFO were, the lines intersected. So
is it legal to write about someone's experience without their permission?
Well, Betty and Barney went to a lawyer. And, since they had made a report to Pease Air Force Base, and it went to Project Blue Book, and since they had made a report to the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, even though it was listed as confidential, they had told family, they'd told close friends, they'd spoken with their minister, they'd spoken with their church group, the Couples Club. And so I guess the word was out a little bit, but they certainly didn't want this to become public knowledge by millions and millions of people around the world. That's for certain.
Well, Travis Walton had the same thing essentially happen to him. A book was put out without his permission.
Yes.
So, an entire book, which, unauthorized biographies are nothing new, I guess.
Right.
But still.
How did it affect their jobs and their standing in the community? Did that devastate them that way?
They didn't lose their jobs. They feared that they would, but Betty was actually promoted to supervisor in the welfare department. So, it didn't hurt her. Barney was treated nicely by the people that he delivered mail to. He worked for the post office. And the only problem was that somebody, like at Halloween, egged their car. I don't know if this had to do with their interracial marriage or it had to do with what was released about their UFO sighting.
Right.
There were the people who knew them, the people in New Hampshire knew that this was the truth. Betty and Barney were not the kind of people to make anything up, and they were certainly stable members of the community.
Right.
They were not mentally ill. Barney had a mind of his own. Betty had a mind of her own. They were always clashing when they came together and disagreed, and they enjoyed it. They really enjoyed a good debate, I think.
Either of them had childhood experiences? I'm not sure if I asked that last time.
Had either of them?
Yeah.
Not that they could remember. And, Dr. Simon, the psychiatrist who hypnotized both of them separately and reinstated amnesia at the end of each session, did not go back to their childhood. So we don't know I mean, he went back to Barney's childhood where he was standing in a field and he was capturing a little rabbit who wasn't aware of his presence. But this wasn't about a UFO. That was just about how Barney felt when he was standing in the field with this craft hovering 100 feet above him and him looking up at these non-human entities. And by the way, that did not come out for the first time under hypnosis. The non-human entities that he observed are in Walter Webb's report in October 1961, about a month after this occurred, after Walter Webb, the NICAP investigator and astronomer, by the way, he was a scientist, had interviewed Betty and Barney. So that was, I guess that was reason to.
Yeah, I don't know if people realize that, this was at a time when something like this is absolutely unheard of. People being taken on board a craft. There was one case that received any publicity, and that was the Antonio Villas-Boas case
in Brazil, and
yeah.
But that was not known in the United States at that time. It was a few years later when anyone who was a member of the public who was interested in UFOs heard about it. And most people, I think, didn't believe it at the time, even though there was an incredible amount of evidence. I did sort of a journalistic research endeavor on that. And I believe I have an article on my website at Kathleen-Marden.com on that. I know that I've written about it. And boy, there was a tremendous amount of evidence in that case, including radiation burns on his body after that encounter.
Yeah, multiple witnesses too. It was hanging over the farm for the days preceding it.
Yes.
Yes. So a lot of people saw it. It's incredible. He tried to take an object off of that craft. That's when he got escorted off. They pushed him down and said, "You're time to go."
Those little guards will not let you leave that craft. They did the same thing to Betty. She tried to abscond with that book. She called it a book.
It was,
yes, the leader. No, they didn't. The one she called the leader, who was actually the translator and her escort, told her she could take that with her as evidence so that she could prove this really happened. But as she was leaving the craft, the little guards, who were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, saw that she had it, and they took it away from her, and she was furious. She was so angry about that. She was yelling. She didn't want to leave it. No, she didn't.
So close.
Right.
To having something that would have changed everything.
That's true.
And
how much of that book did she get to pilfer through? I mean, was she looking through it before she walked off at all? I mean,
yes. In fact, this was more like a tablet. She called it a book, but we didn't have tablets in those days.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was able to acquire evidence from her because in the year 2000, I started investigating the case formally in 1991, slowly. And in the year 2000, I asked her about those symbols. I asked her if she had, if she could remember any of them. And I gave her about a week, went back, and there she had symbols. She had several. Now, there were actually, I believe, 6 rows of these symbols, and they were vertical rows. But she gave me a row. And she said she wasn't sure if they were in the precise order or not. But, oh, there they are. There are the symbols and her signature. And so I don't know if you know this, but Dr. Don C. Don Derry, who worked with Bud Hopkins and who has also worked with me on my study and the MUFON ERT study on 516 experiencers, and Dr. Stuart Appel had worked on 2 symbol studies. Are you aware of this?
No.
I did not know this.
Very, very interesting studies. They used experiencers. Dr. Donderi had developed a test to determine if people were with Bud Hopkins actually, and a social worker from New York had developed this test to determine if a person was or had UFO abduction syndrome, if they were wannabes, knew a lot about the topic, but didn't have any of the other characteristics, or if they were just like people from the public who were hoaxing. And so they were able to identify the people who were had UFO abduction syndrome.
Oh, wow.
And Bud Hopkins had collected these symbols from these people under hypnosis.
Mhm.
So in these two studies, they had control groups, people who had never been abducted, people who had never seen a UFO, that sort of thing, never had contact. And Dr. Donderi developed sort of a statistical scale. He was a psychology professor at McGill University. And so he developed this scale. His students had photocopied everything, or he had photocopied everything on the same kind of paper. And then the students used that scale to analyze the different groups. Those were people who people had been hypnotized, and they had drawn or sketched the symbols they saw on the craft.
Right.
And then there were the graduate students who were hypnotized and told they had been having an experience that they saw symbols on craft when they actually hadn't. And then the control group and the students compared these symbols. And in these two studies, the scientists were able to determine that the symbols drawn by those in what they called the abductee group. That's the word we used in those days. We didn't call it experiencers or contactees or anything. It was abductee. That's why I'm using that word. I hope I'm not offending anyone. But in the people in that abductee group had symbols that were almost alike, very similar, whereas they were very different from the wannabe group, or the ones who were hypnotized, and very different from the control group, just people from the general public. And the scientists said that this could indicate that UFO abduction is real.
Well,
Yeah.
what's really interesting is I interviewed this lady who was a therapist, a really intelligent witness, who had an experience that relates to this, because Bud Hopkins, from what I understand, allowed those exact symbols to be used in his TV miniseries that were portrayed during the program.
What year was that?
This was I don't know, 90. I don't know. I'm sorry. It was remember the miniseries that based on Bud Hopkins' book Intruders?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was called Intruders.
But I don't remember the part about the symbols. But that was
when the guy was taken on board. It was shown twice, and I freeze framed it because this lady said that when she saw those symbols, she hopped off the couch, and her boyfriend's like, "Oh my gosh, those are the symbols you've been drawing. Those same exact ones." She's like, "Yes, I know." So there was verification of that for her.
Well, those abductees had seen those symbols prior to the television show, fortunately. So nothing that anyone saw on a television show was part of that. So that I was worried about the scientific validity of that study. But
you realize when I saw them, I freaked out because I recognize them. I know what they are.
Yeah, and I want to bring this up because Dolly asked me. She did not know about Betty seeing a book or tablet or symbol or any of this.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
And Dolly,
Yeah.
as you know, is a contactee herself.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I showed them to her, and we put this together. And for those of you who can't see it, this shows Betty's symbols, and Dolly recognized them, actually.
Yep. Yeah, it's shorthand for how to make a right turn when you're flying. And it would be something that we would teach, like if we were going to bring you on board and we were going to give you a shot at sitting in the seat and trying to fly, there's a tool that will give you, it's a wand-like thing, okay? And you hold it in your hand and it helps you connect psychically to the craft. And the symbols are shorthand to teach you how to do things. And a right turn is one of the simplest to do, okay? And you have to visualize it, and the symbols help you visualize what you're doing when you work it. And it would be, we're going to make a right turn, and this is how you do it. You have to go into the skiff position. See this, the top one is the craft. You're going to make a right turn, and you have to skip up a certain way. In other words, you're changing the polarity of the field that the craft is following at that moment. It literally short stops it, and then it turns it into the next direction. So if you're in this direction to make a right turn, you would go here. And those are the two symbols that show you make the turn, and you're turning to the right, okay? And then the next one would be, once you make the turn, okay, you will see a heads up display, and that's that weird W thing in front of your eyes, and it tells you to hold stasis. You don't do anything. And there's the one below that is to level off. Come out of skiff and level off. Okay. And then the next thing you do is you see the heads up display, and you know which way you're going to turn again after that. And so you're going to go into skiff this way instead of this way. All right. And make the skiff back into the opposite direction. In other words, you're going to loop it around. You're going to reverse what you did. Okay. And then the next one is to stay skiff, keep going straight in skiff. And then the third one is to hold steady again, like that. And then that's the last one. That's where you hold steady and you let it go. That is the shorthand for making a right-hand turn. It's very specific. When I fly, every maneuver I make has multiple directional application, sequences, I guess is the best way to put it. Otherwise, I'd fly it into nothingness or walls or hurt people. It's like when you're a fighter jet pilot, you don't just play around with a stick and go any way you want to go. You learn that if you're going to bank to the left, you go to the right with the stick, or you go to the right. Everything is opposite, and you learn these things one after the other. And when you're a pilot, they have shorthand for it as well. And you said she had the book. And she called it, and you just said she called it a notebook. That let me know immediately that is a short book. She probably had it in her hands on board. She knew it was there, and she wanted to take it because she knew it was in it. And it's too bad because it would, and exactly, they write things in the downward position. They go from right to left, okay? You don't read what they write from left to right. It's right to left and top to bottom, and they go in rows like this.
Amazing. Do you think she recalled her everything that happened, or is that perhaps some slipped by? I mean, that's possible to say for sure.
She didn't recall all of the symbols. She only recalled
that one.
In terms of the whole experience, do you think that she recalled all the events that actually occurred?
I don't think so. I seriously doubt that she remembered everything and remembered everything accurately.
I'm curious, why did the hypnotist tell her not to remember at the end of every session?
That is because he was working with Betty and Barney, and he did not want them. There were two reasons. He didn't want them to contaminate one another's information because he was attempting to determine whether or not this was real. Okay. The second thing was that at times, both Betty and Barney were so emotional that he felt that if they remembered it right away, it would increase the level of trauma for both of them.
Wow. I wish he hadn't done that, honestly, because one of the things that I've learned over the years is that the more you remember, the trauma lessens because you start to understand what's happening for real.
Right.
It's the not remembering that traumatizes you more than remembering.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah, but again, this is an unprecedented experience. There was no recourse. There was no place you could go to for, information or help on this. They were the first.
They were the first, yes, and the first to undergo hypnosis for this. And they only underwent hypnosis because Barney had developed a medical problem, bleeding ulcers that wouldn't recede with regular medical treatment. So he underwent hypnosis over this amnesia. He was referred to Dr. Simon for this purpose, to overcome this medical problem.
Did it work?
And it did work.
Good.
It worked until the violation of confidentiality and everything went public. And it was so distressing to Barney that he began to have problems again. And of course, he died from a cerebral hemorrhage in 1969 when he was only 46 years old.
I'm so sorry. That's tragic.
It was a tragic loss.
So what did they think when other people started to report these kinds of experiences? Because it was like a year after that, I think there was another book that came out called The Terror Above Us by Malcolm Kent. I don't know if you're aware of that book, but it covers an upstate New York case involving two brothers. Their pseudonyms, the Steiner brothers.
It came out in 1967?
It was 1 year after
or 1966.
Don Fuller's book.
Okay, 1967 then. No, I wasn't even aware of that, nor were Betty or Barney.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it was a tiny, I have it somewhere back there. It's a tiny itty bitty little paperback book. But I think it's probably a legit case because it has a lot of the details that we see. But, you know, as the years passed, I'm not sure what was the first time that they saw, you know, someone else has experienced this as well. Was it like the Travis Walton case? Or, I mean, there's got to have been at some point.
Well, there was
not the only ones.
Right. There was Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker. And then came 3 women from Kentucky.
Right. Mona Stafford, Louise Smith, and Elaine Thomas.
And Elaine Thomas, yes. And Betty actually helped them. They were so traumatized, and Betty spoke to them and really helped them a lot. And then came Travis.
Right.
He was a couple of months after that, I believe. Or they were a couple of months after him. It's been a while since I've
Herbert Schirmer and
talk about this.
Herbert Schirmer and Moody. I forget this first name.
Raymond Moody.
Raymond Moody, yeah.
Yes.
Or no, wait, that's the near-death author, isn't it? So, Charles Moody, Sergeant Charles Moody.
Yes. All right.
Yeah, Herbert Schirmer, Sergeant Charles Moody. It started to come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, the Allagash abductions. What was that, 1978? I think.
Wow.
I could be wrong. But, you know, on and on, more and more. MUFON was calling that time frame the time of the humanoid, because there were so many sightings of humanoid entities who were non-human, and experiences on board craft. So many people, and Coral Lorenzen wrote a lot about that as well.
They followed right on the heels of that.
Yeah, from APRO.
Yeah, they're true pioneers too. I really admire their research.
They certainly were. And one thing I loved about them is they insisted that the investigator include all of the information that the experiencer reported, that they didn't leave out something because they didn't believe in it, or something like that. Everything had to be included, because there's so much overlay in this with the paranormal.
Right. There's multiple layers of information that people will remember a certain way, you know, depending on who you are, what your beliefs are, how you were raised, everything, the whole paradigm of your existence is not always communicated in a straight line. And it's not always understandable by everybody who's around you, because you have cultural differences and everything. And people will remember things from those viewpoints, and then they'll bring it out a little bit at the time. And you have to take in the whole thing and just let it wash over you and try to see it from their seat, not yours, you know, to help experience it with them so that you get a real true foundational understanding of what they're telling you. And I'm glad that they did that, because it's important. Every little detail matters. Every little detail, you know?
It really does. And I think that initially people, and especially when I'm thinking about Betty and Barney, could not fathom what occurred, how their car, you know, did they drive that 8 miles from the close encounter field when that craft was hovering above their vehicle and they heard these buzzing sounds that left the magnetic circles on the trunk? Did they drive all that distance? Betty and Barney, under hypnosis, said, I'm driving, and we're driving, and we're driving. I seriously doubt that they were driving.
Yeah, they're probably being guided. Although
either guided or picked up.
Yeah.
And also, when they found themselves back on the highway in a new location, miles away from the abduction site and even further away from the close encounter field, how did they get there? They thought they must have driven there. But that's when they heard the second series of buzzing tones and regain full consciousness. So it makes me wonder if they were actually dropped off there by the craft, or did they actually drive all that distance?
I know you can do strange things when you're under that influence. When I have an implant in my hand, my right hand, and they decided to just pick the right moment. And I was a very busy person in those days, and I just happened to be at work. I was in college, and I was working as a security guard. And the last key that I hit, you know, those disc clocks that you key on different floors, there's a key hanging there, and you put it in the clock and turn it, was on the roof. And I was gone over an hour and a half. My partner, who was downstairs waiting for me, was starting to freak out. What the heck, you know? And I finally showed up, and I came out of the elevator, and I was just totally stunned, unable to communicate anything. I was just staring at her, and she started screaming at me. And when I realized that I had an hour and a half, and how the hell did I get there? I walked. We opened up the clock to see if I was hitting all the keys. I did, all the way to the top floor, but I didn't hit a single one coming down. Okay. And we went up to the top floor to look at the door to see if I had shut it and locked it, and it was injured. There's a big, huge pound in it, and the knob was just messed up. And we went out onto the roof and looked, and things were really weird out there. And then it hit me while I was standing there that my hand hurt, and I realized that something had just happened to me. Something was surgically placed in my hand. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and we went downstairs and said nothing to no one about it. We lost our jobs.
What could you say?
Right.
And I thought about it for a long time. And back in those days, it was this, you know, it was the late 70s, early 80s. There was no way for us to have cameras on us. Okay. I would have loved to have gone back and look at them to see what I was doing. All I know is that I hit the keys going up, and I didn't hit them coming down. And that almost got me fired, you know, but I had an injured hand, and they think I said I slammed my hand in the door. and they let me get away with that.
Mm-hmm.
I was operating. I know I was operating. I was walking around.
Missing time can be very disorienting. So are you thinking maybe the UFO picked the car up and took it into the craft?
Yes, they probably did. It had to have. That's what I'm thinking about it. If their car was in another location and they don't remember driving or getting there, do you know what the time frames are? Did they figure that out? How much time occurred in between each of those sites, and how feasible would it have been to drive it? Would the driving of it be within those time frames or not?
It probably would have been like 15, 20 minutes. But how did they get off the main highway onto a side road, down another smaller highway, and onto a dirt road? They found themselves. Well, let me back up a bit. When Dr. Simon, when they came to that point of the tones on the car, each of them paused, and Dr. Simon was saying, well, what happened next? And they were confused. They didn't know. There were tall trees all around. They were on a dirt road. And they were saying, is there an accident? What's going on? Are we being robbed?
Wow. More
and
than likely,
so-
they were brought on board and the car was transported as well. And then they were put back in the car. You know?
I suspect that they were transported. Yeah. But
They wouldn't
there
have
were
tra-
entities in the road. I believe that they actually did see these entities because they had a conversation with each other under separate hypnosis, but one told their side of it about what is it? And then Barney finally said, it's the ones I saw when I was standing in the field. And then Betty became terrified. They started to move toward them. She opened the door. She was going to run and hide in the woods, but they intercepted her.
Yeah.
They pointed something at her, and she lost consciousness.
I want to ask you and Preston a question, because you both research a lot. And I'm going to tell you why I'm asking it afterwards. Have you ever, either one of you, ever gotten a story of a gray driving somebody's vehicle somewhere at any time?
I don't think I have. I feel like I would remember that right off the bat.
Yeah. In my experience,
some of the cars
too dangerous for them. They would have, if they would have been caught, they have to stay stealthy, and there's no way they couldn't even probably reach the pedals. They're that short, or look over the top of it. So
there were some taller ones too. There were some that were taller than Betty. There were two that were taller than Betty, who was like 5'1".
People do report the car driving by itself. It's like, my hands aren't even on the wheel.
I can't remember. I thought that there might have been something, but no, I don't think that I can remember an ET ever driving a vehicle from any of the cases that I've worked on.
No, when they finally, how did they discover what they learned under hypnosis? Was it when they sat down and listened to the tapes themselves, or did the doctor say, okay, now it's time to remember?
No, Dr. Simon asked them if they would like to listen to the tapes in his office. And so they said, yes, they wanted to. And so they went in. They had been going every Saturday. It was a total of 6 months. And for the last 2 months, they listened to the hypnosis tapes and talked about it and processed it together. And Dr. Simon, of course, had no scientific evidence that extraterrestrials were picking up people off the highway. And so he was grasping at straws, trying to find any prosaic explanation that he could. Well, maybe, Betty believed her dreams, and Barney absorbed these dreams when he overheard Betty talking about it. That's the reason that I did a comparative analysis. I actually transcribed, and I wasn't a good typist, but I transcribed all of those hypnosis tapes, all those hours. And then I compared their statements, and they said so many things, detailed information that contradicted Betty's dreams.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this was real. Yeah. I tried everything I could to discredit this story. Did they get lost? I had read everything I think that the debunkers and disinformants have written about the case. And
well, speaking of disinforming,
it was real.
I want to bring up something that we did mention early before the show, just briefly, because I think it's important, because there is a certain researcher out there who's claiming, some pretty odd things about Betty and Barney Hill, that they didn't have a real experience. And
yes.
I think we know who it is, but I'll leave it up to you if you want to talk about him or not, or even address this.
Yes, I heard Dr. Stephen Greer on a podcast, and an associate of mine sent me the link, and I hadn't been aware of it. And I was listening, and he said, Betty and Barney Hill did not have a UFO abduction by extraterrestrials. they were taken by human hands. And I was like, what? What? I mean, the years I've spent investigating this case, Becky and no one even knew where Betty and Barney were that night.
Correct.
Point.
So here's the point. Was this his direct knowledge, or did somebody inform him of this?
According to what he was saying, he has, I think it was more than 100 whistleblowers. And he had a whistleblower who told him this. So he believed the whistleblower. Then I kept listening to where Dr. Greer had gotten his information regarding the Hill case. And he said that, well, he had read the first book that came out in 1966, and that's what he knows about the case. He's never read my book. He's never looked at any of my research. And I have never stopped looking for scientists.
You personally? Ever had a conversation with you at all?
He never has. I wrote email messages.
Your evidence, none of it. He's never studied the case that you present, being there and being in part of, actually, you're involved in the story. You became not a bystander. You actually became part of this story in this process. I would like to make a plea here. All right. I would like to say something publicly to Dr. Greer. Dr. Greer, I want you to understand that we can tell a lot of things about a lot of people at a lot of time, but without personal experience in researching it completely on both sides, knowing all of the information, not one thing or whistleblower, but all of it, I suggest that maybe you contact Kathleen Marden and speak with her. Marden, thank you. And get this straight. That would be fair on your part.
I wrote a very nice letter to him.
Yeah.
And in that letter, I asked him to explain how 11 different things to me, and explain who had a craft that could hover silently, that could rotate. Yes,
that could add a few things to it.
that could bounce back and forth like a yo-yo rapidly. That, I mean, so unconventional. Who had that? Who had the technology that they could hover over the Hill's vehicle and cause these code-like buzzing sounds to strike the trunk of their vehicle, leaving a magnetic field and shiny spots there, and for Betty and Barney to feel that sort of electrical tingling sensation pass through their bodies. In fact, Betty felt of the metal on the car to find out if she'd get an electric shock. She didn't. But they felt that tingling and lost partial consciousness at that point. Who could do that? Who could produce these entities with large heads, who were telepathic, who had no hair, who had large chests, but spindly arms and legs? They were not similar to any human body structure.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
so many different things.
There's so many details in their case that matches up with so many other people who I know are legit contactees. There's simply not enough of a workforce out there to produce this many cases. It's, J. Allen Hynek was quoted as saying 1 in 40 people have had an onboard experience. That's a lot. I mean, that's millions.
Yes.
And I believe it's probably close to that number.
Yes.
Because, there's been other surveys, of course, the Roper poll, which found 1 in 50. Mm-hmm. But when I heard that quote from Hynek, that's when I asked everyone I knew, because we all know 40 or 50 people. And I found about 4 or 5 people in my circle who've had this experience. And we're describing exactly what Betty and Barney Hill were describing. So no. All right. Well, I just wanted to bring that up because it's important, but I don't want to dwell on it because, I mean, if you want to talk more about it, but we do need to take a quick station ID break because we are now at the top of the hour. I just wanted to let everyone know that you are watching The Light Gate. I'm your host, Preston Dennett. My lovely co-host is Dolly Saffron. Our absolutely amazing guest is Kathleen Marden, who has written many, many books, which we are going to get into, I hope, other than just the Betty Hill case, which
Let's
is
do
so
that.
fascinating. I mean, it's just endlessly fascinating. But this is episode 61, and we are streaming live on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans, and also 107.7 FM radio. Also, of course, on YouTube and Facebook. And if you get Roku, we are streaming live on Roku as well. All the shows are archived, so if you don't get a chance to watch the live, you can definitely check it out. And also check out Kathleen Marden's information, which is in the show notes. And so far, yeah, we've been talking all about Betty and Barney Hill and their amazing experiences and all the things that led up to Kathleen's research into this. So that's where we're at, and we're now approaching our second hour. I do have your questions, guys, lined up, but if you have any more, be sure to put them in chat. In caps is better. And another reminder that we are changing times, starting at 5 Pacific time and 8 Eastern time, starting in July, which is coming up. All right. I think I'm caught up now. Okay, so you've written so many books. I think
8.
one that was really important was, with Stanton Friedman, who, God bless him, is an amazing pioneer.
He
in
was.
his own right in all of this, and really, emphasized how important it is to do scientific, objective research. And
It was such a privilege to work with him.
Right.
He was an amazing man.
I mean, in your book that you co-wrote, you talked about Phil Klass and Donald Menzel and some of these active debunkers and disinformation artists who apparently we're still dealing with.
Yes, they're back.
So, yeah, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you learned about that and all the disinformation in this field. That it's muddying the waters.
It certainly is. And I developed a real interest in that because I knew that it was happening to Betty, particularly after Barney died. And I was trying to separate fact from fiction initially. So I had to read all of their books and compare what they had stated to what really happened, what was in the documented evidence, the original investigation reports. And so that was extraordinarily important to me, and how I discovered how they twisted information. First, they would use only a small amount of information and they not tell the whole story. So that they would open up the opportunity to inject doubt and to create various hypotheses about what could have happened. Such as Betty and Barney were traveling on narrow, winding roads, mountain roads, and this must be what happened. They saw a light in the sky. And then Betty had a series of dreams, and they thought they'd been abducted. That's so much baloney. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Highway hypnosis. They always try to. I feel like we're all victims of the UFO cover-up to a certain extent. All the time, money, and energy to make witnesses look like they're hoaxing, hallucinating, or misperceiving, or mentally ill.
Yes. Yes, so much money and time has gone into that. And, it's the intelligence community too. It's not just amateur debunkers, or I don't even like to call them debunkers, because debunkers the definition is they take the bunk out of something and tell the truth. These people are putting the bunk in. So that's why I call them disinformants, really. They're not really debunkers.
Wow.
And they're not skeptics. Their minds are made up.
Right.
They have a job that they're going to do. Now,
I feel like
why
they know
are they
it's
doing
true
this?
too. It's disingenuous.
It
Right.
is. They're lying.
Yeah.
And so I want to know why. What is the psychological process that they go through? Are they so fearful of this that they have to lie about it?
No,
Are
I
they
think it's worse than that. It's
So-
way worse than that.
I think it's nefarious, honestly.
Yeah. So, well, I have a lot of different ideas.
Yeah, they're little generals in a whole army of disinformation that is guiding one thing. The little jobs are generally well paid for. You know, if you do this, you'll get a certain amount of money for it, or you get this. You know, there's always something in the offering of what they're doing, or they're doing it for righteousness' sake. They're so deluded or delusional that they're doing the right thing, that they're willing to do something wrong to do what they think is right. That is a psychological anomaly in our entire human genome that people employ. We're being operated by a mafioso type of life. Okay, and I'll give you, for instance, why.
I agree with
Started
that.
way back back in the days of old, when men were bold and maidenhood was in flower. These people lived on big plots of land with a castle or a duchy sitting there, and all the people lived within the walls of this, and they were protected by their superiors, by those who had authority over them. And if they did what they were supposed to do, they were protected. If they didn't, you're out. Or something bad would happen
with
to
your
you.
head.
Okay, look, it's like that now. We are in a life where we're told what to do, or you're out. You conform, or you're not going to be conformable to anybody, and you're ruined. Okay, that we have people. Insurance companies say, look, we'll take care of you. We'll make everything great for you, but you have to pay us money for this, okay? The government says, we'll protect you, but you must pay these taxes, and you must swear allegiance and NDAs and all kinds of stuff to us to make this right. They compartmentalize everything. So there's a terrible hierarchy from the top all the way down to the bottom.
Yes.
And
And
everybody's
from
still invested in it.
intelligence
Yes.
agencies to
Right.
just people who don't want to believe it, who
Exactly.
are frightened
And
or afraid of
The driver,
that it will frighten the population.
right? And
But-
that's a lie. That's the biggest lie of all. Does not make sense. The more you shine a light on something and show it for what it really is, people are going to do one of two things. They're either going to accept it and go, oh, okay, I see that. Or they're going to get mad as hell because now they know they've been lied to. Now they know they've been used, and now they're going to pay you back for it. Okay, that's what they don't want at all. They don't want their control, their authority usurped in any way, shape, or form. And they do have an agenda. They have a reason for what they do. And people need to wake up to that. People need to realize that, no, this is not, don't play their game. Don't believe their agendas. Don't believe their authority over you, any of it. Get off this slave train, because the more you start thinking for yourself and doing what you know is right, the least they're going to have control over you. And that's what they don't want. And they will muck you up with every kind of lie, every kind of story, every kind of situation, every kind of war, this, that, and the other. It's all smoke and mirrors and pressure to get what they want, not what you want.
Yes. And do not respond to them on social media.
No.
If they attack you, simply ignore it.
Exactly.
The people
You're
who
exactly
know
right.
the truth are going to continue to know the truth.
Right.
And you don't
Operate
want to
under the
give them
truth whether they like
attention.
it or not. That's right. We operating under the truth is the easiest, quickest way I know to thwart anything they got throwing at you, and it'll help you stay focused on what's really going on around you and why. And I hope people start to employ that thinking, because it's important. Everybody's so worried about what the government thinks. Everybody's so worried about what's happening. All the craziness that goes on in our government now is nothing but a giant soap opera to control you. and it's on both sides. It's not just one side or the other. It's both, all the way across the
I
board.
agree. That's why the work
Yeah.
you're doing, Kathleen, is so important, because there are people in this field who are calling themselves UFO researchers. Well, I'm not sure they really are. Honestly.
Yes, I agree with that. But let's get back to fact, fiction, and flying saucers, because I wanted to explain something about Philip Klass.
Okay.
He was the most prominent disinformant, UFO disinformant of the 20th century. And I wanted to know what made him tick.
Oh,
So
cool.
I went to the American Philosophical Society, where he had a collection. I made several trips up there to Philadelphia and to go through his files, Dr. Donald Menzel, his friends' files,
Wow.
Dr. Edward Condon, and a number of different disinformants. And they all knew one another. But how did Philip Klass get into this? He was an electrical engineer. He had a bachelor's degree in engineering. He became a writer for a magazine in Washington, D.C., Space and Technology magazine. And it used to be Aviation Weekly before there was Space and Technology. And so he had no interest in UFOs. He hadn't done anything until he got himself into trouble with the FBI.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, he
Really?
was, they
Yeah.
were following him. I have his FBI file.
Wow.
They were following him. They even searched his apartment looking for radio equipment that would broadcast into Eastern Europe.
Okay.
He was making
Wow.
alleged business and ski trips to Europe fairly frequently. And so he had done that, and he had published a couple of articles where he violated the law by publishing secret government information, technology. And they had a choice. They could prosecute him. But if they prosecuted him, they would have to reveal the truth. And they didn't want to reveal the truth. So I believe that they threatened him. They put him into a corner and they said, first of all, this is a national security issue. If you want to maintain a good reputation, if you would like to be on television as our spokesperson, we want you to do this. So, and radio shows too. He was on multiple radio shows. He wrote books, all of them full of false information with a little bit of truth added in here and there. Of course, you have to add a little.
All good.
So it was in 1966 when he read his first book on UFOs. He wrote this in one of his books. That's how I know. I've footnoted that in my book. And he read Incident at Exeter and figured out that it was all plasma, that there wasn't really an unconventional craft that was hovering at tree level over Norman Muscarillo and a police officer. It was just ball lightning off power lines, off in the distance. You know,
yeah, I read his
no
book.
truth to it.
It's a study in absolute, I don't even know what to call it.
Baloney.
It's like, oh my gosh. Things he would say to, you know, I'm not going to use that word, disinform a case or whatever, just insert false information is mind-blowing.
It is. He was very clever. I'm sorry, Dolly. Go ahead.
Did he have a family?
He was single for many, many years, and eventually he married a woman from Eastern Europe. And
he was
and
handled, absolutely being handled. Yeah,
no children.
Yeah, that's why he was being handled. They weren't letting him.
Well, it gives me a little bit of sympathy for him, a little bit, because again, so many people. I mean, we're all being pushed around because of this subject, And it's changing, thanks to the work you're doing and people like Dolly coming forward, and everyone's doing their part. But man, we're still fighting a battle with this.
I know,
Yes.
and it's getting worse. It's about to get worse. There are people who are on YouTube who are very, very good at reporting the truth, and they're now being demonetized. They're being hassled. They're being threatened every day. I mean, like 3 or 4 being like little pins being knocked out of this, the news system, all of it. And I see censorship coming big time, even on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah,
and it's so unfortunate that this is happening, because we used to have this before something like 2011, 2012. And then for the longest time, we had truth tellers. They were not bringing out the disinformants. And some of the trolls, the harassment by maybe amateurs, children of Satan, whatever you want to call them, they were there. But now I'm convinced that the government is back at this. Not the government, I should say the military.
Yeah.
The Pentagon is behind
agencies.
this.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's gotten nastier, I think, than it was before. The threats are nastier. People are being made ill.
The research itself is shoddier. We used to have so many really good investigators. Walter Webb, you mentioned.
Yes.
He was one I really respected. And of course, Donald, the physicist guy, James McDonald.
Yes, James McDonald. He was incredibly good, just incredibly good. He was I talked about Phil Klass's involvement in James McDonald's life, in fact, fiction and flying saucers. I used case after case where Philip Klass was ruining people's lives. He was the hitman. Menzel was just ignorant. He wouldn't investigate a case, but he would conjecture what it probably was from his position as an astrophysicist. But Klass was the hit guy. He was bad.
Yeah, I saw him on TV battling Travis Walton and Mike Rogers. And boy, Travis and Mike were so mad, rolling their eyes. I mean, they were almost ready to throw the chair at him.
Yes.
Because he was just saying untruths.
Yeah. And in his files, the letters that he would write were just, he would be making jokes. Like someone would write and say, "Are UFOs real?" And Philip Klass said, "The only people who believe they're real are those who believe in Santa Claus. Do you believe in Santa Claus? If you believe in Santa Claus, you probably think that UFOs are real."
I get those comments on my YouTube channel regularly from people.
Yeah, we need to learn how to disenfranchise them. Okay, if we just turn them off and quit listening to them and quit giving them any credence whatsoever, they'll just fade away. You know, maybe they'll try to bring somebody else on the playground. Right, dead air. Just give them dead air. You are absolutely correct. Just give them dead air. That's all they deserve.
Right.
It's amazing.
Ignore them. Do not give them publicity. That's what they're looking for.
Right.
Yeah, because it makes them look a little bit right, and they're absolutely wrong. And you don't want to do that.
Right. Well, I want to get to questions pretty soon here, but I also want to bring up this book because I think it's an important book. Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. So what should we do, Kathleen? What can people do when they suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I'm having these experiences?
Well, the first thing that I suggest is that you keep a journal. And put it right next to your bed. Yep. So, I mean, most people remember at least part of an experience when they come in, or when they return you. I remember a time when they had dropped me, and so they were returning me, and they were being so careful. There was one standing on my bed, and it was like they were measuring almost. Is it just perfect? And then there were two next to me on the other side. And, So that was kind of hilarious that they were doing that. But keep that journal, write the date, write the time frame, write everything that you remember, and keep that, because you might forget it later.
Yeah,
Also,
not only what you experienced, but what you felt as well.
Right.
oh,
exactly.
yes, absolutely.
Every nuance. That's right.
And then you need to check your body for new patterned marks. I'm not talking about a little black and blue or a little puncture wound or something like that. I'm talking about patterned marks on your body that should not be there. Go into a dark room. Get yourself a little black light or little flashlight that's a UV light. Go into a dark room and check out your body. If you have fluorescent patterned marks on your body, then hold the black light and have somebody take a photograph don't use a flash. Just take the photograph of that on your body. And you want to keep all of that information. Some people set up game cameras or security cameras in their bedrooms, because so many of the experiences today just take place in your home. You might have been outside the first time, but they know where you live. And so it's so much easier just to come and take you whenever they need to take you for whatever purpose.
Right.
And so that's important. We talk about the process, the steps that you go through from realizing that this has happened to, the shock, the denial, to the different stages of processing this information, and also the changes, the transformation that experiencers go through over time, how people become suddenly more intelligent than they might have been previously. They might never have had an out-of-body experience, but they will have an out-of-body experience.
Oh.
Yeah. You become psychic or intuitive. You might develop the ability of touch, of healing through your hands.
Yeah. I want to explain something. That doesn't happen because they're with you. It happens because you're with them. In other words, everybody's already psychic. You just don't realize it. And it's like learning to talk. If you start talking, you're using that ability. And your psychic ability, they're communicating with you that way, and it's goading you to use yours. And the more you communicate with them, the more you're working with them, the more your abilities are transforming.
I definitely noticed it's a two-way street, because a lot of contactees,
but they're not making you that way. They're just bringing out your abilities, your own abilities. They're enforcing them and teaching you how to use your own abilities. It's like a mother teacher talk or ride a bike. It's just something that's natural for you to do. And
that's the word right there, natural. It's not supernatural. This is natural human abilities.
Yeah, absolutely natural for you to do. That's right.
And they're concerned about the health of our bodies. And when people become ill, when they're experiencers, they can be healed. You wrote a book about that, Preston. Very good book, in fact. And that is so important to experiencers, to know that these entities are not just treating them like lab rats or treating us like lab rats, but that they are concerned about the toxicity in our bodies. That's why they do some of these tests, to check us for toxicity, to try to cleanse our bodies, and if we become ill, if we develop cancer, for example, they will heal us. I had a case in Canada where the experiencer had been diagnosed with cancer. And I said, send telepathic messages to your ETs. Send them every day whenever you relax or meditate. Send these messages. And a couple of weeks later, he sent me a film, and it was of an orb that slid down his wall. It was a beautiful baby blue, and it flew across the room, and it was morphing, and then it dove down into his body, and it healed his cancer.
I have yet to find a major researcher who deals with experiencers, basically focusing on that, who doesn't have healing cases. I asked Bud Hopkins once at a convention, this is back in 1994, because he's written books, but he never once wrote about UFO healing cases.
Right.
It puzzled me. So I asked him, it's like, oh yeah, I have them. And I'm actually really encouraged by it that ETs seem to be most interested in the most lovely aspects of being human. So, although, there's so much fear surrounding the subject, so much confusion.
There is a lot of fear. Yeah.
I'll absolutely acknowledge that, but I don't think they're here to hurt us.
I don't either. I don't. They certainly frighten us. We, regardless of the experience, so many people are traumatized initially. You have to work through that. If you hold on to fear, if you hold on to trauma, if you develop hatred toward them, like so many people do, you're never going to be able to move on and live a comfortable life. You're never going to elevate your vibrational frequency and be happy. And it's really sad when I see people who are hanging on to that.
Oh, I know.
That negativity.
Yeah, they built a wall and they're not learning anything. They're just recycling all these emotions and all these ideas in themselves. And they can't break out of it or see the truth of anything because they're too busy being involved with that. And it's really sad, It
is. And I went through that for a long time just because I'm Betty Hill's niece. And I didn't dare. And finally, I developed the courage to speak with John Mack. Bud Hopkins hypnotized me. I spoke with other prominent researchers. And I was still, I don't know, I still felt traumatized. But then I met Denise Stoner. And I started to go to her experiencer groups, support groups. And she hypnotized me. And she was so kind. I had so many conscious memories of my experiences. That's what was so traumatic. I didn't understand it. But then through that hypnosis, I calmed down. And, you hear about people loving those non-humans. And a lot of people say, oh, it's just Stockholm syndrome. Well, I don't think that it's that. They've helped me. They've given me gifts that, physical gifts. Their kindness.
I've had several contactees say they've never felt such great love as they have from ETs.
Absolutely.
A spouse when they're married for the person or holding their child. They'll use that same word, a love like never before. I've heard that phrase.
Yes, the most unconditional, intense love you've ever experienced. I've had that happen to me.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, can we pull up a few questions? Here's one that came by email, actually, prior to the show. This is from Jeff. He's asking, question for Dolly and Kathleen and me. What can you tell us about the connection between certain experiencers and a metabolic condition that can cause cravings for protein? I don't think I have any cases of contactees developing cravings. I've heard some contactees have cravings for salt. I've never run into that. I don't know if you've heard anything like this or what Jeff is asking.
This was on our first study. And yes, there was an elevated level of people who craved salt after having an experience, but no one mentioned protein.
I've actually noticed the opposite. Some people lean towards vegetarianism.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Not always, though.
Well, vegetable protein.
Well, you have a comment on that question they asked you as well?
Yeah. I'm just going to do it from this standpoint because this is medically known. All right. If you're on a plant-based diet, your intelligence suffers. That is a fact. The fastest way I know to put somebody into a cult is to take protein away from them and put them on plant-based. They become pliable, their emotions, there's everything. You're not feeding your brain correctly. We're animals, just like all the other animals that are, we eat not just plants, we eat proteins as well. And it is important that our bodies metabolize certain proteins to remain healthy. And if you're coming back from ET and you're craving something, you might ask yourself, maybe there's something going on with you, and they've emphasized this with you to pay attention to that particular thing. And that's the way I'm going to talk about it. I think that's more of what's going on.
That's a great response.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, here's an interesting question from Andrew Rollins, who asks, how can a person tell a being's natural ability from technology? I find that an interesting question because some people are healed by ETs using technology, lights, but others get a hands-on healing type of thing. And to always explain this, a lot of the craft themselves are basically using a sort of a psychic technology. So
it's light technology. It's light. They're light workers. They're so advanced that they know things about the use of light and light spectrum and frequency that we don't understand yet. I don't even have a clue over. And sometimes they facilitate things because the amount of light needed is higher than what they could supply themselves. And then sometimes they're capable, they can generate enough of that psychic energy in light to heal you. Generally, if they're going to use a light, something technological on you, it requires some sort of surgery on you. It requires some sort of transfer of cells, whatever. It's technical in that it's like a surgeon. I'm going to use a laser so you don't have a bloody scar. It's just going to be a real pretty little line on you. It'll go away real quick. That kind of thing. And then there's some things that are healable, like if you have an infection, and they use light technology, psychic light technology, to actually kill whatever the infection is that way with that type of light technology. Their psychic ability. They can triage you with light technology. One of the things I learned to do with them is that as a nurse, I was really good at triage. All I had to do is put my hands on you and I could feel where you were injured, and I would be asking you questions and it would verify to me that I'm feeling exactly what's going on and go directly to the heart of the matter. They do that. They triage this way when you come on board. They will look at you, they'll feel you, they'll touch you, they'll go over you.
Technology
it's absolutely both. And think about it, it is right. If they can't have enough energy to do it themselves, they'll employ technology to facilitate it. So yeah.
And I believe that they are empaths, and
Yes.
we become empaths
Right.
after our experiences with them. So we can, if we can get into a person's auric field, we would be able to sense the condition of their body. We would feel that pain. I've had that happen when I've worked with experience where they've had a physical problem, and I could feel that pain in my own body without them even telling me. I would have to say, what's going on here?
Yep.
All right, here's an interesting question from Brown Dwarf. Was Barney the first brother to be abducted by a UFO ET and be documented, I wonder? Well, certainly the first to be documented, I think.
As far as I know, I don't know if he was the first to be taken. I saw a film, dating back into the early 50s, where there was a black man who was stating that he had been taken by benevolent entities. So maybe he wasn't the first.
ET doesn't discriminate at all. That's
No.
not what he is. You're a human being to them, and y'all matter. So don't worry about it.
I've worked with people of all ethnicities, for sure.
Me
Pat
too.
Brown, she was black. Jay Gardner, a number of people. Percy Galloway was a guy I met at MUFON very early on. I never did interview him. But yeah, people of Pacific Islanders, Latino,
Doesn't matter.
name it, Asian,
Yeah.
all of it.
Yep.
So, but it's an interesting question because I've had people ask me, why don't black people ever have these experiences? I'm like, they do. They absolutely do. Okay, here is a question from Morgan. I absolutely love the late interviews done by Betty in later years. She remembered so much. Did any of you ever get to meet her or Barney? I didn't, unfortunately. Of course, you, Kathleen.
They were my aunt and uncle.
Grew up with them. That's right.
Had a very close relationship with them.
Was the UFO subject something they talked about often, or is it just something they kind of put in a drawer and like, you know what, this happened?
When Betty and Bart, right after they had their experience, and they were trying to find answers, and they were so distressed, Betty would sit and talk with the family about it, but Barney didn't even want to think about it. He would just leave and go to the backlands of the family farm. This was really distressing for him, and he did not like it when Betty spoke about it. But finally, after the hypnosis sessions, he would talk about it, but just not as much as Betty. Really not as much.
Barry Littleton. Yeah, he's another black guy who's had contact. I've talked with him. He's a really nice guy. Okay. Here's a question from Brian W. Did they get implants? That does come up in so many contactee cases. It's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question. I have no idea. Barney died when he was so young, but I know that Betty was taken more than one time. She never made that public because she was under attack already by people who didn't believe that it was even possible. Why is she going to say, "Oh, it happened to me once a year"?
Yeah,
but I don't know if she had an implant. Probably.
Yeah,
probably too. I think most do. I think if you're a contactee, it's probably true.
Mm-hmm. I even wonder if that was her first time, or if it was.
There's no way that was her first time. She's probably contacting most of her life, honestly.
I think that could have been true. Yes, speculation, but.
Okay, this is not a question, but I think it's an important statement. Scarlet Fire says, extraterrestrial contact, what to do when you've been abducted, by Kathleen Marden. This book, in caps, is one of the best I've read. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, I've heard that comment by others as well. So I'm very proud of that. Thank you so much.
Just saying, when you started talking about it, and I was waiting for you to say the first thing you had to say, in my mind, the very first thing is write it down. Okay, that's what I tell everybody. Write it down. When you said that, I went, "Yep, you got it. You know, that's absolute."
So would you recommend hypnosis for people?
I would, because hypnosis used therapeutically is excellent. It is excellent. EMDR therapy, imagery, that kind of therapy with a good qualified person, not an amateur.
Right.
All of that is extraordinarily important, I believe.
Yeah, you don't want a hypnotist who's going to lead you into something that you don't remember. You don't want them to, because they'll take you to a dream state at that point, and you don't want to go there. You need to be the one to talk about things, not them tell you what to talk about. Okay, they can ask questions, but it can't lead you at all. And the best thing a hypnotist can do, in my opinion, and as a nurse, this is a very valid point I'm about to make. You are not reliving as if you're still there. What you are doing is you've been made to be comfortable. You're in a place where you're safe. You know you're safe. You have an emergency word to get you out of it if need be. That your safety, how you feel, what you're going to recall has to be natural to you. You have to be in a place where you can do it in a natural, safe way for you. And if they go any other way than that, don't even stay with them. Get out, get away from them.
Be prepared. You're opening up a lot more than one experience, perhaps.
You need someone who is highly qualified. I'm a retired hypnotherapist, and all of those things that you said are so true. And I used for forensic hypnosis when I would work with a group of people who were taken all at the same time, just like Dr. Simon hypnotized Betty and Barney. But I used forensic hypnosis and hypnotized them separately if it was an investigation. You don't have to do that if this is for the purpose of healing. I look at those differently. I think that with anyone that I used forensic hypnosis with, we did the healing part of it. And I'm a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner too. At least I retired
very
from that
cool.
now.
Okay.
So yeah, you can go to my website, Kathleen-Marden.com. I have written articles about hypnosis and the academic studies done on hypnosis with Betty and Barney. And I think I have the hypnosis that I did with Calvin Parker on there as well.
Wow. Amazing.
Cool. That's cool.
Okay, I've got some more questions. I'm curious about this because I haven't heard any updates. This is from Scarlet Fire. This is actually a statement. Kathleen is seeking to redo the Betty Hill movie more accurately. I heard there was something in the works, but I haven't heard any.
But I'm not involved in it.
Oh, no.
No, I'm not involved in it. And that really worries me. I mean, I have more information on this
Can
than
you file an
anyone.
injunction on that
And
at all in their name? Because you operate their estate, right? You're literally the executive officer of their estate.
I am.
Can you file an injunction against it? I mean, there's got to be something you could do to stop that.
Well, the individual who has the contract to produce a movie based on my book with Stan Friedman, captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, I believe has reached out to them. I haven't heard any more about them doing this production. So I don't know. I knew that they had a relationship with Barney's granddaughter, who was something like 37 years old when I heard about this. Now, Barney died years before she was born, and she knew almost nothing about it, only what was passed down through her grandmother, who was Barney's ex-wife.
Okay. Wow.
That's certainly interesting. Well, I hope if they do it, that you do get involved, because I think that's important. Yeah. And that it's accurate. I was so disappointed by Fire in the Sky, which was so good up until the UFO part.
As a researcher, accuracy is so important. Really? I mean, I'm not a writer of fiction.
Right.
To me, accuracy is all of it.
Sensationalizing something for fear or monetary gain or whatever is not acceptable behavior as far as I'm concerned in our society. We have to all start learning to tell the truth. And this is one of the ways we can start doing that, is absolutely following facts and data and not imagining or amplifying something that isn't true or real or there, you know. Mm-hmm. We want them to know the truth, not this, you know.
Scarlet Fire says the captured book is so good as well. Yes, I can attest to that. It's really a page turner. Okay, let's see. I think we've got some other interesting questions here. This one is from Rat Food. Are the hypnosis tapes from Betty and Barney Hill public?
They are not. Betty asked me not to make them public. However, I did make a DVD using the hypnosis tapes in my comparative analysis of their statements. So you hear them along the entire trip, including the experience on board the craft, where you hear Betty's statement and you hear Barney's statement. And I think that I've commented about how this was, this is not in Betty's dreams, but they are saying the same thing here. Sorry, Dolly, you were going to say something.
No, I'm like, you finished what I was thinking when you said what you said. I was like, okay. Sorry. I kind of read. No, I hate to openly admit this, but I can. When you're talking, I already know. I hear what you're saying as you're saying it in my head.
That's
okay,
you use it enough, it starts to develop.
Yeah, myself. It's weird. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Top of my head, it tingles with electricity.
I can't help it. And so people are going, what are you thinking when you do that? And it's like, I'm so sorry. You don't know what I'm thinking. I'm kind of trying to think what you think. And I can't help it. And I'm already agreeing with you because I hear you saying it in my head. It's creepy.
All right. Here's an unusual question from Morgan. And he says, it's my biggest question, and I'm not sure if it's already been answered, but do the human spirits use the same dimension as the ETs? And do they meet each other when our loved ones and pets pass over? You got any comment on that, Kathleen? It's an unusual question.
Yes, I think that humans probably have a separate portal that they go to when they pass over. I mean, it's very, very complicated, but we're all one. When you think about it, we are all one under one consciousness. So there would be ETs within that afterlife consciousness state. And, the ETs that I know are in the 5th dimension. There are a couple in the 9th dimension too, but they're they no longer have bodies.
Yeah.
So do you have any cases where people have been taken on board and seen? Because Whitley Strieber talked about this, and I know I've got one case where someone has been taken on board and seen a deceased loved one or a spirit. Have you ever run across that? Any of your...
Yes, with deceased loved ones. And I've always wondered, what this experiment, is this an experiment with human emotion? Dolly, you're shaking your head. No, please answer it. You know the answer and I don't.
Okay, well, we know that there are 12 dimensions in this universe, and we're all on top of one another.
Mm-hmm.
And, start at the bottom, but it's on the outside the bottom when we go toward the middle, okay, in gravity. And we're in a gravity-heavy dimension, 3rd dimension. And the further out you go, the less gravity and things change in physics, okay, quantum physics start occurring and different things. If you're born in the 3rd dimension and you're operating in the 3rd dimension, you're on the same level as everything else in the 3rd dimension, including ETs. If an ET is alive and born in this dimension and living in this dimension, and you can communicate with them, they are spiritually in the same evolution as you. This is an evolutionary process that has nothing to do with anything else. We're here for a reason. We're here to learn. And everybody in this dimension are learning the hard way. Trust me, all of us. When you go up, when you evolve, when you ascend up dimensionally, you start losing certain attributes. One of them is like by the time you hit the 5th dimension, you're non-corporeal. Okay, you can assume any shape you please from prior lives all the way into whatever future you're experiencing in the 5th dimension. 9th dimension is really way out there. They're more like unbelievably evolved light beings, and their intelligence is off the charts. Okay, I aspire to that. I want to be that. Okay, that's where I want to go next. And so we are all of us, because we're all in the same universe and we're all within these 12 dimensions. We are all the same psychic consciousness. We're all one in that way. We're all in what you would think of as source. Source is literally where we all are without being in a dimensional space, without body. We're mind. We're all mind. And we know each other, we hear each other, and we experience one another. ET has ghosts in the 3rd dimension, just like we do. And you can go on board a craft with them. And if you have a family or a loved one who is just following you around going, what are you doing? Why are you there? And they show up on craft. And I've actually seen that happen. I've also actually seen human beings pass away on craft, and the ETs honor that and bring them out into the next phase of whatever their existence is. It's a big, ethnic thing that they do, because they're capable of leaving their bodies, and they're very good at it. And so they know where you're going, and they kind of give you an escort out. It's a big deal. It's a big happy day for everybody.
Well, this brings us to another one of your books, which I think is also really important, because what you are doing is what some researchers aren't. They're not acknowledging the spiritual aspects and how this can absolutely spiritually transform a person. And here's your book, 2nd edition, Forbidden Knowledge, for those who can't see it. It's a beautiful cover. Forbidden Knowledge, A Personal Journey from Alien Abduction to Spiritual Transformation. And this is something you personally experienced.
I did. This is my personal story.
Wow.
My a little bit about my life with my aunt and uncle, the hypnosis sessions I've had, my journey for deeper understanding through all of the investigative work that I've done, through all of the research, and then the experimentation. And doing an experiment where I and a team of investigators met with a council of ETs, with Kevin Briggs, who you may have heard of him,
You mentioned on the show,
he's had a long-term relationship with these non-humans. And as researchers, we were looking for physical evidence, and we actually did acquire evidence. We had as much as a 10-degree increase in the atmosphere right around, or the environment right around Kevin's body when these ETs were speaking through him. And he was just soaking wet. They showed us their craft. They showed us orbs. They communicated telepathically with us. And it was really remarkable, wonderful gifts that we received from them. And in that book, I have 114 questions that our team asked the ETs and their responses.
That's awesome.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, you know the message they want everybody to do that. They want everybody to ask. They want everybody to communicate with them. They want you to stop thinking about all the crazy stuff that's going on here and start to heal yourself and develop your ability. And when I say develop ability, I'm literally telling you that this is the spiritual aspect of self. Okay, this is who we really, really are. This is nothing. We're just in this right now for whatever we're learning. That we're way more than that, and ET is also. And I'm going to read the book because I'm proud of you. That's so cool, Kathleen, that you did that. I love that. That needs to be talked about more than anything, honestly.
Oh, thank you. I like to tell the truth, and this is the truth. This is the second edition. The first edition is different than this. The second edition is more focused on my exploration, my work. The first edition is more focused on my struggle, my personal struggle through all of this. So choose whatever you want.
You started right. You started with the healing, and then you went into that's the point. That's the whole. You prove it right there. You're proving this the process. I'm dying to know what's the most interesting question you all asked them that you got an answer to, and what was the answer?
Oh my gosh!
Choosing between 100 questions.
Yes, just so many. We learned a lot about consciousness, a lot about the different dimensions, what it was like in the dimensions that they lived in. What I wanted to know, why did they take my family along genetic lines? And they said, well, we didn't do that initially. We just randomly selected people. It was opportunistic. But then when we discovered genetic lines that could survive the collapse of the Earth's ecosystem, then we took people along genetic lines to for further development and that sort of thing. So it was very interesting to receive the answer to that question. That
we just have a few minutes left. I want to pop maybe one or two more questions if I can. Here's an interesting question from Octopus with No Friends about implants. And they were asking, where, may I ask, are these implants placed? Because I might have a thing. I've heard many places in my own research, but what about you, Kathleen?
Me too. Those implants have intelligence, so they might insert it through your hand or through your foot, and it will travel to wherever it needs to land in your body. So, I mean, a lot of people have them right around the left ear. I have one right in front of the ear. You might have one behind the ear. some in the brain, throughout the body. Some people have more than one. I think that they have various functions, and you might have to have one taken out and one replaced. But more recently, I've found that people, like in one family, the mother and both daughters were taken. They woke up with actual puncture wounds in the lower part of their teeth, in the gums, and X-rays indicated implants in the jaw where they couldn't easily be removed.
Right. Yeah. They're like bone. The one in my hand is in a crown of bone, which is fascinates the heck out of me because the bone was altered to put the implant in the bone, and it's crown around it like a ring with a stone in it, and it doesn't move around and do that. It has a specific purpose. I have one in my high sinus that does move around. It drives me crazy. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. One in my upper right thigh that I call it my early warning system because it gets jumpy when the wrong kind of people are coming toward me. Like within a day of them arriving in my life, it will start vibrating. It does weird things. And if they physically get close enough to me, it will literally freak out and start vibrating or jump around in my leg. And it's like, okay, calm down. I got this. It's creepy. This particular implant literally went all the way up to my hip and stayed there for a week. And I thought, why is it there? Why? And then it came back down. And I found out later that I had an issue, and it was trying to help me. If that makes any sense to you, they were sending impulses to it to make me better. And because they knew I had a problem, and they were trying to make me better. And it did. It actually helped me.
I heard implants in arms, legs, hands, and feet, sinuses, jaw, behind the ear, but never really on the torso. I'm sure there must be some cases, but I don't know.
No, there wouldn't be. That involves your organs, and they don't do that. It's always in the extremities or in somewhere near a bone. You don't have a lot of bone except in your ribs, and they leave those alone as well. So it's always near bone.
We're pretty much out of time, but I'm going to pop this one up real fast from Rat Food.
Yeah.
Dolly, do Greys wear red overalls? I have one case, and I know of one other.
Yeah, the little short guys get weird every now and then, and yes, they will put on red overalls. They wear. I don't know why. I think they're trying to make friends with you. Honest to goodness, if you like red, that's what they're going to do because they can read your minds. It's really weird. They have repetitive ability to know you. Okay, in other words, they're not emoting you or emoting back to you, but they want to do things with you if they have lots of contact with you to make you comfortable with them. So if you like red overalls, they'll put red overalls on just so you're comfortable with that. So I'm asking you the question now, do you like red overalls? Have you got some kind of thing with red? That would be my answer to you. What is it about red that you like? Because it's not what they're doing, it's what you're doing that's causing it. So
people must like silver overalls then, because that's very common. All right, Kathleen, we're pretty much at the end. I want to pop up your books again so that people know where they can learn more about your research. Here's the Alien Abduction Files, the most startling cases of human alien contact ever reported. Gosh, you've done some really good
That's
research.
not my claim. That's my publisher's claim.
Probably true anyway. But Forbidden Knowledge, a personal journey from alien abduction to spiritual transformation.
that's cool.
Here is,
And that's the second one, right? Yep.
Mhm.
all right, and Captured, the book you want to read if you're interested in the Betty and Barney Hill case, and you should be, because that's the seminal.
That's the real, that's the real deal.
That's
right
the
there.
landmark case.
Yeah.
Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted, with a glowing review by Scarlet Fire. Science Was Wrong. Startling truths about cures, theories, and inventions that they declared impossible. Stanton, we didn't even get into this. We're going to have you back.
Yeah.
It's not about, well, only a little bit is about UFOs.
That's all right. We do other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fact, fiction, and flying saucers.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I loved writing that book.
And true stories of alien abductions. There's more, but we are running out of time. I mean, we're out of time.
Yeah, we are. We're pushing it. Kathleen, you're gonna hang with us. We're gonna make another date with you, okay? Because this is an infinite subject, and you're very, very well versed in it. And I dearly want to have you come back again and to hear what you have to say. Thank you for everybody for coming this Monday night. We will see you an hour earlier in July, and I'm excited about that. And you all have a wonderful week. Let everything you want to be happen, okay? Especially if it's good for you and it heals you. We have been coming to you from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network and at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. Namaste, everybody. Peace, love. We love you.
And wait, one more thing. Remember, we are changing time.
I did say that an hour earlier in July 1st. Okay.
I also want to give thanks to all the people who gave super chats and everyone who watched the show. And of course, thank you, Kathleen.
Yes.
My pleasure. So good to talk to both of you again.
Yes. All right. Night, night, everybody.